Hello and welcome to this episode of Trash to Track. In this episode I'm going to be looking at a Mainline Standard 4 loco that's been sent in to me by Granville, and it appears to be suffering from the age-old mainline problem of split axles. So we're going to have a look to see if we can get this loco back into running condition, as Granville would like it back as a runner. And as you can see there, those wheels are loose, so it certainly looks like split axles. There's also some detail missing on the body side there, so we'll see what we can do in getting this model back to running order. Now, doing a quick battery test, the wheels do try and move, so that's a good indicator that the motor's okay. So let's take this model over and give it a quick battery test. Not too much though, as it could damage those axles further, but trying to test it with a battery does show that it is trying to run, so there's hope with this yet. Now, to help replace the axles on this model, I actually managed to find a complete front end for a Mainline Standard 4, same running number, for 10 quid. And this one's got good axles, as the axles on the donor model are black plastic and the one on Granville's original are white. Now, it's probably not a very well known fact, but the black axles are actually later in design and are not prone to cracking, unlike the white axles that are fitted to many of the Mainline and early Bachmann models. If it's got black axles on it, black plastic axles, they're not prone to cracking like the white ones are. So I'm going to strip Granville's model down and swap these wheel sets out. To remove the body shell, you have to undo the screw underneath the smoke box, and there's also one under the cab. And then the body shell will lift off to reveal the very familiar split chassis arrangement that we've come to expect from Mainline models. Now, I know a lot of people out there have stopped repairing Mainline, but personally I think they're alright. And if you're a DC user especially, a well-serviced and maintained Mainline model will give years of good reliable service. They're also not too bad to DCC fit, as I've demonstrated in other videos. Now that the body shell's off, I can remove these two screws here that keep this keeper plate in place, and then the whole chassis keeper and the front bogie come away, releasing the wheel sets. And it is indeed the centre wheels there that are in trouble. And going absolutely contrary to what I just said, Granville's original model actually has black plastic axles. But you'll see shortly that I'm not entirely wrong, and that the black plastic axles are actually okay. So I've stripped that down. The cylinders are simply press fit, as are the motion brackets, but you've got to be careful to get them out gently so that you don't break any plastic spigots. And then I undo the screws that hold the chassis halves together. There are 3 black screws and also a silver screw on the rear of the actual armature casing. So that also needs removing, this silver screw here, to get the two models apart. And when the two halves of the chassis come apart, simple case, there's the drive gears, these two plastic insulators, and the cardboard and the cardboard insulator there that separates the two halves. Everything appears inside this model to be extremely clean. There's hardly any fluff, dirt, or old lubrication in this model, which is surprising. Usually these models are caked in dirt. So undoing the motor faceplate, the faceplate will come off after I've undone these two screws. Be careful not to allow the brush springs to ping away. And I'm going to remove the armature in its entirety and give it a clean up, although as you can see it's not overly dirty. In fact, there's very little in the way of dirt in this model at all, and when I get a cotton bud with meths and run it round the inside of that motor housing where the magnet is, it comes out virtually clean. Now, I have never worked on a mainline model before which has had such a little amount of dirt on it. So that's either been recently serviced and put back together wrong, which is why the axles are broken, or it is just genuinely a clean model all round. Even the armature and commutator faceplate are clean. A quick polish up with a cotton bud and meths and cleaning the gaps between the brass plates is enough. There's no need to clean that with the fiberglass pencil. The motor faceplate, which is usually covered in carbon deposits from the brushes, is also very clean. So I am very surprised, pleasantly surprised, that there is very little dirt build-up on this model. The gears and the gears from the drivetrain are also clean, but they're given a wipe over with a cotton bud and meths just to make sure I haven't missed anything. And then it's time to start reassembling the two halves of the chassis. Now I put some Lebel 106 on the gear spigots there just so that they are correctly lubricated. And then we can put the gears back on. The small gear goes underneath and the large gear goes on top and engages with the gear on the back of the armature there. So once they're in, I just give them a quick spin to make sure everything is turning as it should. And then we're going to look at reassembling the two halves of the model. Now, I'm also going to add a small amount of oil to those spigots just to dilute the Lebel 106 a little bit and make it flow a bit better. And then when this model is back together, it will be correctly lubricated. Won't need any maintenance apart from probably wheel cleaning for the next couple of years. So to put it back together, I first put that cardboard insulator and then these small plastic insulators that slot in the grooves in the die-cast chassis halves there. And then the other half can go on, making sure you line up those plastic spigots at the bottom, or plastic insulators. I just use a tweeze and those pliers there just to line them up correctly. And then I will secure the two halves of the chassis together using the screws, and not forgetting this long silver screw that goes in the back of the motor housing piece here. That's necessary. I have once before put a model back together and forgot to put that one in. But the other screws are then all put back in and tightened up to the correct tightness, if you like, to keep the two chassis halves together. Try not to over tighten these screws because they only sit in plastic fittings and you can easily strip them out. So once that's done, the brushes and springs are put in. The brush is put in, followed by the spring, and then the brush keeper is put in. Now it's worth, when you do this, gently put that keeper on there when I can get the spring to go in correctly, that is. So when you put this on, it's worth just putting it on and then holding it in place with your finger, because the brush spring will push that off and it will fling off into the ether if you're not careful. So holding it in place, there are two screws, one is shorter than the other, and the shorter one goes on the right hand side here, which is the one I'm doing up now. Now once the brushes are all in place, I'm going to add a very, very small amount of oil onto the bearing there where the armature spins, so that when it's running round it is correctly lubricated. And now I'm going to turn my attention to this donor model, and we're going to get these wheels off here. And once the wheel set is complete, I'll examine the axles. And here it is stripped down, and it is all fine. The axles are absolutely fine, there's no cracking. And as I said, these are made of that later black plastic, so these should be good. It just needs a bit of a clean up. So with the cotton bud and methylated spirits, I'm going to clean the inside of the axles here, because that is the bit that conducts electricity from the track into each half of the chassis. So these do need to be very clean. And once I've cleaned all of those on the axles, I will turn my attention to cleaning the wheels themselves. Now, contrary to Granville's model, the donor model did have quite a bit of muck build up on it. This was nowhere near as clean as Granville's original. And then, as I said, I clean the wheel treads. First of all, I try and clean them with a cotton bud and methylated spirits, but there's some quite what's the word I'm looking for? Reluctant marks to get off these wheels, so I have to resort to using the fiberglass pencil to polish them up and get rid of all the dried on grease and grime. And once the wheels are shiny, having been polished with the fiberglass pencil, I will do a final polish with the cotton bud and meths, and they will be ready to be put into the chassis of Granville's locomotive. So now they've all been cleaned, I'm going to pop them into the chassis, making sure I get them the correct way up and the right way round. And these will just drop in place when the wheels are correctly set, just like that. And then the motion brackets and the cylinders are pushed onto the die-cast spigots and the die-cast holes, making sure that the linkage is all in the correct place and not fouling or twisted up. So that's correct, that goes in there. And then the cylinders are just a push fit onto the die-cast spigots. Now you have to make sure these linkages are all correct, otherwise it won't run properly and you could end up damaging the side rods. And then the motion, once they're in correctly, the motion brackets can be pushed, the plastic peg into the die-cast hole. It is a bit of fiddly, but if you work carefully you'll get there. And as I said, the cylinders can be pushed on. This is all just a friction fit, there's no need for glue. And then what I do with these models, I'm going to add a tiny amount of Pico Electro Lube just on those axle stubs there. It's conductive lubricant, so it will lubricate the axles as well as aiding in electrical conductivity. And then I'm going to turn my attention to the keeper plate. This just needs a clean. There's a bit of fluff and dirt on it. This is the original that come off Granville's model, so it just needs a bit of a clean up. So once that was all cleaned up, and not that there was much dirt on it, I decided to unclip the wheels off the front bogie, and I will give these a clean with a cotton bud and mess. But like I said, like everything on this standard 4, it was already relatively clean. So now that that's all done, the base plate is put back on. It goes on from the front first and then clips in at the rear like this. And then the retaining screws are put back in. And again, I've said it before, but you don't want to try and over tighten these screws because they are only into plastic and you will thread them and strip it if you're not careful. And then a battery test shows that it is running, albeit a bit slowly, and that's only because, as I found out when I tried to do the next Trash to Track, my battery was dying, so I'm going to have to get a new one. Now, the body shell that was sent to me originally was missing a few detail parts and had a few marks on it, whereas the one off the donor model was actually complete and in better condition. So this is the body shell I'm going to refit to the chassis. So it's I didn't need to. I could have. There's nothing wrong with the body shell apart from those little detail bits missing. But I am going to send Granville the better of the body shells back so that his model is 100% complete, or as complete as it can be, and the other one will just go into my spares bin. So this body here from the donor was just given a dust over, and then the chassis is put back in, and the retaining screw there I'd put into the screw hole there to stop losing it. So this just clips back in, and then the 2 screws we removed earlier were refitted. Oh, they are when I can get them to go on the end of this magnetic screwdriver. And then now that's back on, we'll have a quick look at the tender, although again, nothing much really with this with dirt wise, just a bit dusty. So this was given a dust over. And I will clean all the wheels on the tender. They are looking a little bit grubby. So just using my pliers there to hold it upside down. And again, cotton bud and mess, just to clean all the wheel treads, just to remove any traces of dirt so that it's not transferred back onto his layout when I send it back to him. Now, I said earlier about the axles being broke. Well, actually, it wasn't the plastic axles that had split on this model. Just I got a fibre in my finger there from the fiberglass brush. But if you look at these wheels, the one on the right, you'll see there is a stub where it goes onto the axle, and the one on the left is missing. The reason these wheels broke was that metal stud had actually snapped inside the axle. The axles hadn't split, as I mentioned earlier with this black plastic. They hadn't split, the actual metal had broken off the wheels. So I've never seen that before, so whether that's something that can creep in, Mazak rot or something, I really am not 100% sure. But now I'm testing the loco with a controller and leads, as you can see, because the battery was flat. And it's now in tip-top and fully working condition. And I'm really happy with how this has turned out. Now, mainline models, for their age, really are good models for beginners and intermediate modelers who don't want to break the bank. They're very well detailed, although they don't have sprung buffers. And providing that the split chassis is serviced correctly and is well lubricated, they are fantastic runners. They may be a little bit noisy, but I'd rather spend £30 on a model like this than £200 or above on a newer model. If you've got an engine or anything you'd like to see repaired, please email me at dansmodelrailways@gmail.com, and it may even feature in an episode of Trash to Track in the future. I'm going to leave you now with Granville's 4MT running around the table. I've got a towel over my wife's jigsaw. I was instructed not to ruin that, so I put a towel over it to preserve it. And I'm going to leave the standard 4 running with a rake of goods wagons, so it's just running in, running that grease round, and then I will get it sent back off to him. Thank you so much for watching Trash to Track again. Please like, share and subscribe, and I will catch you all in the next video. Bye for now.